بلغ العلا بكماله كشف الدجى بجماله حسنت جميع خصاله صلوا عليه وآله صلوا عليه وآله.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه أستعين ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله في الأولين، وصلي وسلم على سيدنا محمد وآله في الآخرين، وصلي وسلم على سيدنا محمد وآله في الملأ الأعلى إلى يوم الدين، وصلي وسلم عليه وعلى آله وأزواجه وأحبابه وأصحابه أجمعين. يا نور كل شيء وهداه أنت الذي فلق الظلمات نوره. يا نور نور قلوبنا بنور العلم والفهم وأبعد عنا حجب الغفلة والوهم إنك على كل شيء قدير. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. This is the fourth, I believe, installment of the classes and translations and commentaries on the famous book among the awliya, Kitab al-Ibriz, the pure gold, in the words of Sidi Abdul Aziz al-Dabbagh, radiyallahu anhu. We finished the introductory chapter, which gave some kind of information about the path that he himself took to arrive where he arrived at. And just to emphasize again that Allah Ta'ala, being beyond limits and beyond boundaries, gave all these blessings to him when he was very young. Yani, Sayyidi Abdul Aziz, he passed away, some reports say, before he reached the age of 40. So all these amazing things, amazing knowledges you read and you listen to from him, you can imagine this isn't someone in their 80s, as you might expect. This is someone in their 30s. And Allah Ta'ala, these kinds of gifts and bounties and benefits don't depend necessarily on our merits, but through His attachment to the source of divinely granted knowledge, Sayyidi Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that ultimate word that was given to him by Sayyidina al-Khidr alayhi salam. He arrived at what he arrived at by Allah's grace. And so speaking of this, now we turn to the chapter, the third chapter in the book, في ذكر بعض الكرامات التي ظهرت على يد الشيخ رضي الله عنه. So now we're going to talk about, we won't go through all of them, but we're going to talk about the karamats, the divine graces and blessings that appeared upon the Shaykh. And just as an introduction, we know from those who studied Aqidah that divine graces, karamat and so on, mu'jizat, they're in different categories. And so just as a brief exposure, one of them is called irhas. Irhas, we talked about, means divine grace or a breaking of habits that announce something in the future, of something to come. So when Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, when I was in my youth, teens, 20s, I used to walk in Mecca and the stones and the trees used to give me salam, saying Assalamu alayka ya Rasulullah. And so this was a kind of announcement that when he would turn 40, Allah Ta'ala would give him the risala. Of course, he was already a Nabi from way back when, but at the age of 40 he got the risala. And so this is a kind of announcement miracle, you can say. And then you have the karama. The karama is breaking of the natural norms, which applies to the non-prophets. So the prophets have mu'jizat, and the non-prophets, the salihin, have karamat. And the difference is mu'jiza is the breaking of the norms that's coupled with a tahaddi, that's coupled with a challenge. That, look, I'm a prophet, a messenger from Allah Ta'ala, and this is a proof of that, and can you defeat that? So with the example of Musa alayhi salam and the magicians of Fir'aun, that his haqq devoured and developed the false magic of the magicians. So that's like a challenge and a breaking of norms. Whereas the karamat are not, there's no challenge involved in them. They're not required by Allah as the Prophet would be to challenge those people. But karamat is just a divine grace, and usually they're hidden. They're usually not exposed. Some awliya, however, have their karamats been made publicized, or they themselves publicized it. And then there's a category called al-ma'una, ma'una, divine help, which you don't have to be a wali per se to receive, but it can be for any mu'min, any believer. And ma'una just means, for example, let's say you're imprisoned, you're locked up, and they're not giving you any food, and you as a mu'min pray to Allah Ta'ala, and Allah Ta'ala provides you a source of food that was unaccounted for. Or maybe they might give you 5 grains of rice, let's say, and those 5 grains of rice, you eat them and they're enough to satiate you and to fulfill your hunger. So as it's more subtle even than the karamat. And then there's breaking of habits that are on the negative side of what they call istidraj, leading you on step by step into delusion that you think is something powerful and magnificent, but you could be involved with jinn, or you could be involved with sihr, with magic and sorcery, and these kind of things, sihr and so on. You could do amazing things with them, but ultimately it's for your destruction and downfall. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. So he's saying here, اعلم أن شيخنا رضي الله عنه غريب وشأنه كله عجيب ومثله لا يحتاج إلى كرامة لأنه كله كرامة. Know that the situation, the state of our Shaykh is very wondrous and amazing, and he doesn't need these outward divine blessings and graces, because he himself is all entirely a divine grace. فإنه يخوض في العلوم التي تعجز عنها الفحول. He dives deep into these kinds of special knowledges that the highly developed masters of the sciences find difficult to decide the reality of those matters. ويأتي فيها بما يوافق المعقول والمنقول مع كونه أميا لا يحفظ القرآن العزيز. And he brings you solutions, and he brings you details, and he brings you different aspects of these divine knowledges that go along together with the rational sciences and the transmitted sciences. In other words, they match and they are congruent with what was transmitted from the Prophet ﷺ, whether Quran or Hadith, as well as the rational sciences, the mantiq and kalam and so on. Even though he's saying that he was unlettered, he was ummi, unlettered, and he didn't memorize the whole Quran. He memorized only a few surah. فضلا عن أن يسام بتعاطي شيء من العلوم مع أنه قط لم يرى في مجلس درس من صغره إلى كبره. ولنبدأ بالكرامة التي لا كرامة فوقها وهي سلامة العقيدة واستقامتها. And he's saying here, even though he was never seen, whether in his youth or his, you can't say old age because he died under 40, but in his older years, he was never seen in any dose of knowledge. He was never seen sitting with any scholar. But where did he get all these knowledges from? MashaAllah. And we'll begin with the karama that there's no better karama over it or more superior to it, which is having a correct and sound belief, having correct and sound aqidah. ولما جمعني الله به سألته عن عقيدته في التوحيد فسرد علي عقيدة أهل السنة والجماعة. The first time I met him and I was joined and united with him, I asked him about one of the first things about his aqidah, and he gave me and explained to me what his belief system was, and it matched what the aqidah of Ahl Sunnah was. And so we can stop here and say it's important for the murid, for the student, when he meets someone who is to become his shaykh, that they have to make sure beforehand, before trusting their soul to his hands and his advice, they have to make sure that he has the correct aqidah. And not to check his ma'rifah, That doesn't mean to check his ma'rifah, but to check his aqidah, which means that you're not going to ask him, for example, what's the name of the angel that does this, but what do you believe about angels? So what's the name of the angel that's involved in this kind of planet somewhere in the universe? That's like a ma'rifah question that's not really necessary. So you're not testing his ma'rifah, but you're saying, what do you believe about angels? What do you believe about prophets? What do you believe is possible and impossible for prophets? If he, for example, says that prophets can do sins and mistakes and so on, then you know that he's not a real shaykh. If he says things about Allah Ta'ala that are false, verifiably false, that don't match what's in the Quran and authentic Sunnah, then you know that you're not dealing with a real shaykh, and so on. So this is a very good point that he began with. When he first met him, that's what he asked him. And the shaykh gave him his belief, which matched the belief that he knew, because the compiler of this book, Ahmad bin Mubarak, he was a scholar in his own right. Some say he reached a mujtahid level. So he knew what he's talking about. وَلَمْ يُغَادِرْ مِنْهَا شَيْئًا وَقَالَ لِي مَرَّةً. And he didn't leave out any point except that he was able to mention it and it matched what I knew before. وَقَالَ لِي مَرَّةً. He said one time to me, إِنَّهُ لَا يُفْتَحُ عَلَى الْعَبْدِ إِلَّا إِذَا كَانَ عَلَى عَقِيدَةِ أَهْلِ السُّنَّةِ وَالْجَمَاعَةِ وَلَيْسَ لِلَّهِ وَلِيٌّ عَلَى عَقِيدَةِ غَيْرِهِمْ. Allah Ta'ala doesn't give the opening of illumination to someone except and unless he's established upon the aqidah of Ahl Sunnah. And Allah has, look at the intensity of this phrase, Allah has no awliya who are on a different aqidah. MashaAllah. وَلَوْ كَانَ عَلَيْهَا قَبْلَ الْفَتْحِ لَوَجَبَ عَلَيْهِ أَنْ يَتُوبَ بَعْدَ الْفَتْحِ وَيَرْجِعْ إِلَى عَقِيدَةِ أَهْلِ السُّنَّةِ. If, for example, someone was on a different aqidah before the spiritual opening, and then Allah Ta'ala gave him a spiritual opening, then the first thing that would be required is for him to repent from those false beliefs and to go into and accept wholeheartedly the aqidah of Ahl-Sunnah wal-Jama'ah. قلت وكذا ذكر بدر الدين الزركشي في شرح جمع الجوامع للسبكي. So just he's mentioning some names of scholars here. So Jam' al-Jawami' is a short work, a short matan that deals with Usul al-Din and Usul al-Fiqh, compiled by Sheikh Tajuddin al-Subki, one of the great mujtahid imams of the Shafi'i school. He compiled this short work, and it goes into, as usually the matun do, it goes into just very short but dense statements about Usul al-Din, in other words, Aqidah, and Usul al-Fiqh, some basic things about Usul al-Fiqh. And there's been a lot of commentaries on it over the years, and one of the best ones or most famous ones is by Badr al-Din al-Zarkashi. Al-Zarkashi, very well known alim, a master of these kinds of sciences, usuli sciences. And he said the same thing, that the awliya who are awliya in the ummah are Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. ولم أزل أسمعه رضي الله عنه يمدح أهل السنة ويثني عليهم كثيرا ويقول. I kept hearing him, and often, every now and then, listen to him praise the Ahl Sunnah and say about them, إني أحبهم محبة عظيمة. I love them with a great love. ويطلب من الله تعالى أن يتوفاه على عقيدتهم. And he asks Allah and pleads to him, Ya Allah, please, when I die, let me die having that belief system. ثم جعلت ألقي عليه شيئا من شبه أهل الأهواء فيفهم الشبهة غاية ويقررها أحسن تقرير ويجيب عنها بطريق الشهود والعيان. And I would sometimes, the people who are on a different aqidah, the shubahat that they have, the confusions and the doubts that they have upon certain points in the belief system, such as the Mu'tazila and so on, I would ask the Shaykh about their kinds of different positions and why they took those different positions, and he would be able to explain why those positions were wrong from the standpoint of kashf and shuhud, from mushahada. That as the wali that he was, he would say not only is this wrong from a rational perspective or from a textual perspective, but it's wrong also from a mushahada, from witnessing the reality, that no, this is not the reality as it is, that this is why they went astray in this point and what happened. فتسمع عنه في أمر الربوبية والسر الألوهية وهو يجيب بما لا عين رأت ولا أذن سمعت ولا خطر قط على عقولنا مع كثرة معاناتنا للمعقول والمنقول. And he would give answers that you would never have heard of or never have seen or it never occurred to our minds, even though we spent a long time struggling and understanding and gathering whatever we could of textual knowledge and rational knowledge. That he would still surprise us with these answers. حتى أن من وفقه الله تعالى وخالطه في هذا الباب, such that if someone were, Allah Ta'ala were to bless someone and grace someone and allowing him the opportunity to sit with him and ask him these questions and these topics and hear his answers, وجال معه في أجوبة شبه أهل الأهواء فإنه يكتسب منه قوة وتحصل له ملكة يقدر بها على حل شبه 72 فرقة. He will eventually, you have to excuse me, I have a little cold. He will eventually acquire enough acuity and strength mentally to be able to deal with the confusions of all of the different, 72 sects. وقال لي مرة رضي الله عنه مشيرا إلى الكشف والعيان. He said to me one time, discussing the kashf and the spiritual illumination that he had, ما آمنا إلا بما رأينا. جزاك الله خير. بسم الله. He said, we never had iman, or to say that what we have iman in and what we see corresponds, basically what he's trying to say. أَيُؤْمِنُ أَحَدٌ بِمَا لَا يَرَى. Is it possible for someone to have, and here iman he's talking about yaqeen, basically he's saying, deep-seated, unshaken certitude. Is it possible for someone to believe in something he hasn't seen? فإن الوسوسة لا ينقطع ولا تنقطع إلا بالرؤية. Doubts and misgivings can never be fully and completely demolished and removed except بالرؤية, except by seeing the thing itself. So even though you might have a strong conviction or strong belief, but there is still room for doubts and misgivings. There's still room for shubuhat. And so none of that can be completely erased and removed except with actually and eventually seeing and beholding the reality as it is, untainted. And so that's why the dua of the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa wasallam is very important when he said, Allahumma arina al-haqqa haqqan warzuqna ittiba'a. Make us see the real as it is, and bless us and provide us the blessing of being able to follow it unhindered, not blocked by mental doubts, not blocked by shahawat, not blocked by any other hindrance or any other aspect of the ego or anything else that would block us from witnessing the truth and immediately yielding to it and following it. That's what a wali is. And that dua of the Prophet showed so short and succinct. That's what a wali is someone who sees the real as real and there's nothing blocking him from following it immediately, and someone who sees the falsehood as falsehood and there's nothing hindering him or confusing him about that being falsehood and avoiding it. So someone with that character, that quality, is a wali, period. ثم سألته عن أحاديث الصفات. And just to say, especially in these times, and even more so in the times of Dajjal, it behooves us, and it's very important to, as much, of course, wilayah is a divine grace, but we have to expose ourselves to that grace. So it behooves us to try as much as possible and make this the primary focus of our lives and our times. That not to waste any time in achieving what we can by Allah's permission of witnessing the reality. The divine reality, the prophetic reality, the reality of the afterlife, of this world, of the nafs, and so on. So that there's very little chance of shaitan or dajjal or anybody working for darkness to mislead us, especially with flowery spiritual language, as happens sometimes with certain groups that we can talk about later. And then I asked him about ahadith al-sifat, the thing that all throughout Islamic history has been a source of conflict and trouble. The ahadith and also the ayat that apparently on the surface give a physical or corporeal description of Allah Ta'ala. Such as the hadith that says, for example, Allah Ta'ala descends in the last third of the night. So, on the surface of it, ascribing motion and movement and descent and ascent to Allah Ta'ala. Characteristics of bodies. Or things that talk about the hand of Allah, quote unquote, or the face, or these kind of ascriptions and descriptions mentioned in Quran and Hadith. So I asked him about that. And the Ahlul Sunnah have taken two broad solutions to these kinds of texts. One of them being tafweed, which is simply to assign and submit the meaning, the ultimate meaning, to Allah Ta'ala, not delve into it, not try to figure it out. And the other one, which is the original Ahlul Sunnah position, or you can say the default Ahlul Sunnah position, this idea of tafweed. وَأُفَوِّضُ أَمْرِي إِلَى اللَّهِ, the ayah says, I consign my affairs, all of them, to Allah Ta'ala. So this is what it means here. Or a ta'wil, or giving a kind of explanation and diving into and delving into what these things could mean. Such as saying, whenever it says the hand of Allah, it means the power of Allah Ta'ala. And that could be problematic sometimes because firstly, that was resorted to in contrast and in conflict with mistaken beliefs that crept into the ummah. So to kind of counter those mistaken beliefs, they would resort to these kinds of explanations. But you can't equalize them. You can't say that wherever you see the hand of Allah in a text, it means the power of Allah. You can't put an equal sign there, because then you're putting a mental limit, then you're putting a limitation, and you're solidifying something that's too quantum, it's too much out there. So why can't it mean the blessing and generosity of Allah? It can mean other things in other contexts. But the best and safest option, as he'll say here, is just to say whatever Allah means by it. That's what he means by it. And that was that ta'weed, that resorting to giving some meanings to that. That was a later addition to the school, but it's not the default position of the school. فقال رضي الله عنه الواجب فيها التفويض وشأن الربوبية عظيم. The obligation, the primary or default standard obligation, is to consign the meanings to Allah Ta'ala, because the rububiyyah, the lordhood, or the divine quality and nature, is something too immense and tremendous to be able to understand for us. And so what matches reality the closest is to say we are too limited to understand what that means. ولا يقدر العباد قدرها ولا يطيقون الوصول إلى شيء من كنهها. The servant, the limited servant, the contingent servant, is not able to fully comprehend, not able to fully measure what these things mean. ولو أن أهل الدنيا أرادوا الوقوف على حقيقة ما سمعوا في نعيم أهل الجنة ما أمكنهم ذلك. Even the people of dunya, were they to try to understand the reality of the blessings and the Jannah that the people in Jannah experience, they would not be able to understand those things. فإن العنب ليس كالعنب والتمر ليس كالتمر والذهب ليس كالذهب. The earthly grapes are not like the heavenly grapes. The earthly dates are not like the heavenly dates. The earthly gold is not like the heavenly gold. ولو فتح الله على عبد ونظر إلى ذهب أهل الجنة وذهب الدنيا وعنب الجنة وعنب الدنيا. If Allah Ta'ala were to open someone's eyes and he were to behold the grapes of the Jannah and the grapes of the dunya, and the gold of the Jannah and the gold of the dunya, and so on and so on and so on, لوجد المعاني متباينة إلى الغاية ولم يجد بينهما اشتراكا إلا في مجرد الأسامي. He would find that the meanings and the realities of these two things are so far removed from each other, and the only common ground would be the name, that this is named a grape and this is named a grape, but what they are in reality is something so different from each other. وكذا أهل الأرض الثانية بالنسبة إلى نعيم أهل الأرض الأولى. Here in the Sufistic cosmology we have different earths, just like we have different celestial spheres, different heavens, and different paradises. And so the people of the second earth, they don't know what the meanings of these words are for the people of the first earth. And he gives the example of فإنه لو سمي لهم العسل والسمن واللبن والخبز ونحوها بأسماء بعض ما يأكلون. If we were to talk about things that we eat like honey and yogurt and bread and so on, the names of things that we eat, فإنهم لا يبلغون إلى معرفة العسل وما ذكر معه. وذلك أن هذه الأشياء مفقودة في الأرض الثانية. These things are not found in the second earth, in the second level of the earth. فإذا كان هذا في الحادث مع الحادث فكيف بالقديم سبحانه مع الحادث. So because they don't have those kinds of things, how can they really comprehend them when they haven't seen them? And if that's the case with creation with another creation, how can it be even, what about, that's even more so with the fact of comparing a creation with the eternal creator, al-qadim, ma'al-hadith. The contingent with the eternal, there's no logical connection between them. فالواجب على العباد إذا سمعوا شيئا من أحاديث الصفات أن ينزهوه تعالى عن الظاهر المستحيل ويفوضوا معناه إلى الله تعالى وعز وجل. So the requirement, the obligation upon us servants is that if they hear any kind of primary text that has that kind of ambiguous meaning, that they say that Allah Ta'ala is far removed and transcendent above the impossible literal meaning of those, and that they instead consign the ultimate meaning, what it really means, to Allah Ta'ala Himself. And this is like Aqidah 101, this is very basic stuff, but for some reason people all throughout Islamic history have been confused by these things. Now Ahmad ibn Mubarak, the author, is speaking himself, so this ends the Shaykh Abdul Aziz's words. He's saying, وَالتَّفْوِيض, this idea of consigning the meanings to Allah Ta'ala, is the position of Imam Malik and Sufyan ibn Uyayna, wa Sufyan al-Thawri, wa Hamad ibn Zayd, wa Hamad bin Salama, wa Shu'ba, wa Abi Awana, wa Rabi'a, wa al-Awza'i, wa Abi Hanifa, wa Shafi, wa Ahmad. He mentions a lot of scholars, Bukhari, Tirmidhi, ibn Mubarak, ibn Abi Hatim. This is وَهُوَ قَوْلُ أَهْلِ الْقُرُونِ الثَّلَاثَةِ الَّذِينَ هُمْ خَيْرُ الْقُرُونِ. This is the teachings and the positions and the assertions of the scholars of the first three generations, which are the best generations, as Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said. حتى قال محمد بن حسن الشيباني صاحب أبي حنيفة, to the point that Muhammad bin Hassan, one of the two best students of Imam Abu Hanifa, he said, اتفق الفقهاء كلهم من المشرق إلى المغرب. All of the scholars from the east and the west agree upon and are united in على الإيمان بالقرآن والأحاديث التي جاءت بها الثقات عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم في صفة الرب من غير تشبيه ولا تفسير. All of them are united in the belief of what the trustworthy narrators have narrated from the Prophet of Allah Ta'ala sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, whether Quran or Hadith, things that describe or give descriptions of Allah Ta'ala, Ar-Rabb, the Lord, that they believe in those things without resorting to comparisons with creation, nor with actually giving ultimate explanations of what they really mean. So those two things are avoided. وقال إمام الحرمين, who is Al-Juwayni, في الرسالة النظامية, one of the epistles or books of Imam Juwayni, that he talks about أصول الدين. And he says the same thing, يعني اختلفت المسالك العلماء في هذه الظواهر فرأى بعضهم تفسيرها والتزم ذلك في آية الكتاب وما يصح من السنن. Basically, the ulama, some of them took to explaining what these things mean in the verses of the book and in the authentic sunnah, giving explanations and ta'wil and so on. And the imams of the salaf, the imams of the earlier generations, their scholars, إلى الانكفاف عن التأويل, they did not delve into giving explanations, and as I said, they consigned what those meanings were to Allah Ta'ala. والذي نرتضيه رأيا وندين الله به عقيدة اتباع السلف, and the thing that we choose for ourselves, the belief that we choose and select for ourselves, and what we believe in is the same as what the Salaf believed in. للدليل القاطع على أن اجتماع الأمة حجة, because of the proof, because of the situation that when the Ummah gathers and agrees on something, that becomes a hujjah, that becomes itself, the ijma' of the Ummah becomes a proof in itself. فلو كان تأويل هذه الظواهر حتما لا شك أن يكون اهتمامهم به فوق اهتمامهم بفروع الشريعة. If it was, on the other hand, necessary to give meanings to these kinds of texts, then you would see them more involved and busy in doing so, instead of their being busy in the furu' of the sharia, the secondary details of the sharia, which is like being involved in fiqh basically. You see them mostly being involved in fiqh and not so much being involved in aqidah. So they knew and understood that this is where the primary focus should lie. And how do you worship Allah, and how do you please Allah Ta'ala? وإذا انصرم عصر الصحابة والتابعين على الإضراب عن التأويل كان ذلك هو الوجه المتبع. And so when we see that the Sahaba came and left, and the Tabi'een came and left, and so on, and they didn't delve into these things, then that's the same thing that we should do. And again, this is the default and standard position of the Ahl Sunnah. And this is also the position of the Sufiya as well. Different than some of the scholars of Aqidah who are not Sufis, who went into Ta'wil as a way to defend the beliefs from outside shubuhat. So we get the point here. ويشير بقوله وقد تقدم النقل إلى ما لخصناه من كلامه في تسمية من سبق ذكره فعقيدة شيخنا رضي الله عنه هي عقيدة أهل القرون الثلاثة. The upshot here is that he's saying the belief of our sheikh is the same as the belief of the first three generations, the scholars of the first three generations. وهذه هي الكرامة التي لا كرامة فوقها. And this is the divine blessing that there's no better divine blessing above that and beyond that. And the scholar Nasr al-Din ibn al-Munir, who was a Maliki scholar, he says الاستقامة يستحيل أن لا تكون كرامة, that بخلاف غيرها من الخوارق, the breaking of the natural norms, such as flying in the air or walking on water or being provided by from the universe, reading other thoughts and so on. All of these things can be good or bad. But having istiqamah, having uprightness in one's belief and one's action, it can never be but good. It's always good. And that's why that's the best and the safest karama to aim for. Otherwise, other karamats, other breakings of habits can be either rahmah or it can be fitna. It can either be a divine mercy or it can be a divine test and a source of trouble. And after hearing this, وبعد سماعك هذا الكلام فاعلم أن ما شهدناه من كرامات الشيخ رضي الله عنه وكشوفاته شيء كثير لا يمكننا استقصاؤه فنذكر بعضه. So he finished with this karama and he says, after establishing that, then know that also additionally the other karamat and the other unveilings of the Shaykh that we heard from him, it's so hard to gather all of them together, so we'll mention some of them. And so he goes into mentioning some of these karamats, and we won't go, there's really no point or no benefit or very little benefit, except in, we can mention 2 or 3 just to give an idea or a picture of to give a more clear picture of how a wali is and the situations and the states of the awliya. And so the first one he mentions here is how Ahmad ibn Mubarak, had a son who died young, who died early, and his wife became, of course, naturally very sad and very distraught because of that. And so he started to tell his wife words of consolation and saying that, look, if we consider the fact that life is so hard now, and this young boy of ours, he died early, he doesn't have to suffer through this life, and inshallah he can, which is the aqidah again of Ahlul Sunnah, that the youth who died before puberty, they're given automatic entry into Jannah. And so trying to console his wife and making her feel happy and so on. And so when he met the Shaykh the next day, the Shaykh started to tell him, MashaAllah, I liked what you said to your wife when you said 1, 2, 3 and ABC. And he gave the exact words that he told his wife. So he says, I knew that he was with me when I was in my house. And he says, another karama, he says, ومن ذلك أنه رضي الله عنه كان يأكل القرنفل لضر بصدره. He had a sort of ailment in his chest, and the Shaykh used to often eat cloves. Qurunful is cloves, which has a very nice scent to it. فصارت تشم منه رائحة طيبة وهي رائحة القرنفل. When you would sit with him and he would talk, his breath would smell like cloves, because he used to eat them a lot due to the ailment in his chest. فكنت أشمها منه كثيرا إذا كنت معه بالنهار فإذا تنفس خرجت رائحة القرنفل مع نفسه الشريف. As I said, you would smell it on his breath. ثم صرت أشم تلك الرائحة بنفسها إذا كنت في داري ليلا. Sometimes I would be alone in my house at night and I would smell that smell suddenly. And so I knew that he was there. I knew that he was walking in my house along with me. He was there because I could smell his breath. وقد سدت الأبواب وهو بداره في رأس الجنان وأنا أسكن في بكر نقر بقاف معقودة. So like he's saying that he would be in his house in this location and I would be in my house in that location and my doors were locked, but yet I would still smell him. So the spirit of a person is more than their body. The limits of your ruh, when you have your ruh in dominance over your ego, your ruh can do things, and so the limits of the ruh are greater than the limits of your physical body. So while the physical body of the Shaykh was in his house, his ruh was with me. And the proof of that is I can smell his scent. And so that was a miracle, that was another karama. And we can stop here, and we'll continue next time with, inshallah, teaching about the knowledges of the Shaykh. وجزاكم الله خيرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى.
بلغ العلا بكماله كشف الدجى بجماله حسنت جميع خصاله